All right, we are live. Welcome everybody to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Jerry Merkins. With me, CEO of Gunner Tech. What's up, Cody?
Hey, what's going on? Just as the pre-show rolled, the Periscope got a taste of our excitement over old school emulators, so I'm pumped and ready for action now.
Yeah, I'm ready to go, man. And apologies for being late. That's entirely on me. We'll be early next week to make up for it. So diving right in, we have our weekly country store giveaway. We actually have a winner from the west side of the United States this time. It's not a southeast winner like is usual. So we have Jane S. from, I'm going to mispronounce this, I think it's Galisteo, New Mexico. So Jane's got a country store hat and copies of our ebooks heading her way. So congratulations on that. And anyone who wants to enter the country store giveaway can head to our Facebook page and sign up for the country store giveaway there. Country store, by the way, is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. And while you're on our Facebook page, go ahead and answer our question of the week, which last week, what was the question of the week, Cody?
Man, why am
Actually, you just put a little Post-it note on your face that says, remember the question of the week.
I actually had it up when we were talking before the program, and then I was like, I'll get you the link for that emulator thing I was talking about, and then I closed the tab. So it's just I can't win for losing.
Our short-term memories are fading fast.
Wait, it was just, wasn't it? Do you carry a wallet? Wasn't that the last week, or was that the week before?
It's a great question. That'll be our next question of the week. What was the question of the week last week?
Well, I think it was, do you carry a wallet? And because before that it was in an average 5-day work week, do you work more or less than 9 hours? Yep. And so I guess I'm the only one person who doesn't carry a wallet anymore, which I'm kind of stunned about. But like everyone except for, it looks like me and maybe a couple other people said no, they don't. So people are going old school.
Yeah, this is actually this is a shocking route. I thought it would have been close to 50-50 because there is utility in carrying a wallet. I mean, I'm kind of old school. Like I carry cash. I have a bunch of my cards in my wallet, physical cards. So I think we all just need to get with the times.
Yeah,
we're a bunch of grandpas. Yeah, it's almost 100% yes, which is unbelievable.
That's
a lot of votes too for it to be that high.
I know. What I guess I'm in the minority once again, so I'll deal with it.
You're a trendsetter.
I am.
It's hard. It's hard being ahead of the times.
What do they say?
Do we have a question?
The innovator connector. What is it? Innovator connector.
Wallet carrier.
Promoter. Yeah, wallet carrier. That's it.
Question of the week for next week. Do we have that handy?
Yeah, actually, I do, and it was very similar as the wallet. It was outside of work. Do you use a computer other than a mobile or tablet device?
So laptop would count as a yes?
Laptop, desktop. Yeah, it's kind of, I always piggyback on conversations we always have, and we're kind of saying, we obviously use desktop or laptop computer constantly throughout the day, but really when we're developing products, we're always thinking about like, what is this going to do on a mobile device? Because really no one is using a laptop for much anymore. I mean, they'll use it to shop if they're at work, but I was looking at the numbers, I think a couple of days ago, and it's like 85% of internet usage now is done from mobile devices.
So as many people as still use wallets are now only using mobile devices outside of work.
They're trying to access the internet from their wallet, actually.
that's the problem. Maybe that's the wave of the future. Maybe we need to get on that bandwagon. If wallets are going to be around forever.
It is kind of weird because
internet-enabled wallets.
Because so one of the things that's kind of interesting, and I think I'm more intrigued by new tech than you are. Whether I find it useful or not, I probably am I skew a little higher than you do, but
yeah, I'm more intrigued than you for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely more willing to give new technology a try. And one of the things that we had to be cognizant of when it came out was like smartwatches, because we didn't know, they haven't really taken off, but we didn't know if they were. And we have to be ahead of that curve. So we have to know how to write applications for all these things in case the winds change. And man, I really want to like my Apple Watch, but it is so useless. It is so useless.
See, that's the
Um,
thing. I'm always a bit more skeptical about new technology. Like I see the Apple Watch and there's a ton of buzz around it. And that, like I know a ton of people who were obsessed with their Apple Watch. And my gut reaction was I don't think they'll be 10% as excited about their Apple Watch in 3 months. And that's pretty much played out.
yeah,
I think there's sort of an initial buzz around new technology, but you sort of have to take a 10,000-foot objective view as much as you can and say, in 3, 6, 12 months, how much of these going to actually be used? And it seems to me uh, it's tough because I think we've sort of created devices that are good enough. Like I think mobile devices at this point are pretty much good enough. So it's going to be tough for a new technology to sort of break in.
yeah.
Not
It's
that a new
weird.
technology won't, but
Well, and it's weird because my kind of point in that was about the wallet. The phone, like your phone, your iPhone, like the least thing it's actually used for anymore is a phone. And so it was like the same thing with the watch, even though it's not really used, the last thing it's actually used for is to check the time.
it's a tell time. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm like wondering, like, okay, we made a smart wallet. Like the last thing it would be used for is to like hold money or something like that. I mean, the other thing I was thinking about the same thing, and I was gonna text you, but I was like, I always text you my rants about this. One of those things that like is just the hype was out of control, and except for like the very biggest of things, it's kind of fallen flat as IoT. Like the Internet
Hmm.
of Things is where you have like these embedded devices everywhere, and people like get so geeked out to like build like a little microcomputer that can tell you the temperature. It's like your phone can do that. Like, what are you going to carry a little box in your pocket so you can whip it out and know the temperature? But people get so geeked over IoT, and trust me, it has its uses. We've built some apps where it can pull like vehicle position data off your OBS port. It can like pull your fuel consumption and feed it back to businesses so they can see fuel consumption in real time. There are
Yeah.
uses.
Monitor sound levels too. That was one of the coolest things we built.
Right. Monitor sound levels for like noise violations. So there are things, but the bottom line is, uh, the hobbyists out there that do it just are so weird, man. They're so weird because they build stuff that's already existing and they're so happy about it, and like it's going to change the world. It's like, no, man, this exists today. So
Yeah, it's kind of the early days of Apple with a lot of this stuff where, Woz was sort of the tinkerer and Steve Wozniak, and he built machines that were for geeks. So they were, extensible. You could open it up, you could get into the guts of the machine, and you could upgrade whatever you wanted. You could pick out different devices. Whereas Steve Jobs' vision was more consumer related, and he just wanted one thing that could do everything basically. And the trouble is that mobile devices are so powerful now that they can do pretty much everything that a separate device could. So they're sort of like they're almost the end game.
yeah, yeah, seriously, and kind of on that point, for everyone listening, personal note, I had my one of my trucks stolen, and so I've been on this constant battle since I got another truck to figure out how to prevent it from getting stolen again.
We've
So
got to
one of
figure out a way to find that truck, like Liam Neeson style,
oh
track
my
it
gosh,
down,
I what I should have
or
done,
Denzel Washington style. Speaking of the Equalizer 2 coming out, we got to hunt
like
those people down.
I totally missed. Number one, I don't know to this day how a gigantic bright yellow truck goes missing and is never ever seen again. But I should have actually I kind of did leverage the power of the internet, and the internet didn't help me out. I posted it on we posted on Country Shore and had like
Yeah, no
everyone see it.
sightings.
No sightings of it. But so I have this actually I don't have it right here with me, but it's about this size. Let me see if I can hold this up here. It's about it's about the size of a phone, about this size,
Okay.
and it's a satellite tracker. And satellite tracker is great because you don't have to worry about cell phone reception. However, it has to have kind of like a clear view to the sky, which is no problem if you have a truck, because it'll go through like the fiberglass of the not the fiberglass, but the actual outside of the truck. But it won't go through like a roof, for example. You can't put it in your house and get reception.
Mhm.
So I have this thing in my truck, and it's hidden in my truck. So if you steal my truck, you won't know where it is to get rid of it. But anyway, it died, And so I hooked it up to power to charge it, and it turns on when it's hooked up to power, and it charges. It works while it's hooked up to power. Then I unplug it from power, and it dies immediately. And this thing is not cheap, right? And it requires an annual subscription. So I was pretty upset. So I fire off this angry email to the company, which the company's called Spot, and it's sent off this angry email. I spent this much money. I pay you guys an annual subscription, and this thing won't even hold a charge anymore. It's like less than a year old. Blah 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 blah. And the name of my device is a Spot Trace. So the guy emails me back. Their support team emails me back, and you can tell it's kind of a small company. And the guy says, "I'm sorry to hear that, sir, but the device you have, Spot Trace, is not a rechargeable device." And I was a little bit like, what? I was like, what? I was like, what are you telling me? I can't recharge this thing. And he replies
So you
back,
just throw it
no.
away, like use it for a year and dump it.
He's like, no, but you can unscrew the screws and replace the batteries.
Okay. All right.
So sure enough, there's just like 4 screws, and then it's just 4 AAA batteries. And I was like,
oh gosh. You were like, I'm so sorry.
No, I was like, well,
so
thank you
ashamed.
very much, sir.
Click.
So I thought that was great that I got fooled by some very simple technology there.
Well, that's a sign of the times too, is that you just never replace batteries on anything anymore.
That's right. That's right.
Everything is rechargeable now. So it's like, it's sort of going back to the Stone Age when you have to replace batteries.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's go ahead and dive into the topic of the day today, which is actually really interesting. We touched on this in a bunch of different episodes, but we'll talk about it more this episode, which is, would you rather have specialization or jack of all trades?
Yeah, I think we started got into this last week, and I mean, it kind of goes into the size of your company, and I want to make a case for specialization, and I always find myself arguing with myself when I do that. But the only situation where I can kind of come up with a case where specialization is better than general knowledge is in a specialized kind of large company. So, for example, AWS, which is Amazon's virtualization branch that powers probably a third of the internet by now. Like, you want to have engineers who are very specialized in a certain, like, networking or database performance or memory optimization. You want people who are so niche focused that because you can afford it and it's needed. And so that's
Yeah,
where
you want
want
sort of hyper specialization at that level, where
right,
one
exactly.
person focuses on the nitty-gritty details of one really, really niche aspect of the technologies that you're building this stack on. Because
Right.
your whole goal at AWS, which is this massive entity, is to provide better optimizations than anyone else who's providing a similar service.
Right. And actually the way they do it is, so they have I can't remember their title. They're called like brand ambassadors, or well, they're kind of brand ambassadors, right? And so these are the people who write blog posts to explain new features that are getting rolled out, and they're not having the engineer who knows everything about networking optimizations write that blog post. What they generally do is they roll it out as a new product, and the brand ambassador is usually like a general knowledge person and will create a test application or a sample application using the new optimization or the new product that's been rolled out. So Amazon AWS doesn't really have need for the people with the general knowledge, except for to demonstrate their product. And kind of build the front end into their product. They're using, because they don't have people like us who are using the optimizations that they are making. And that's where it gets so rare is there are a ton of people, who will use that optimization, but there's only a select few people who need to know how those optimizations really work.
Yeah, it's sort of I guess the division of labor, right? So a lot of the benefits of using a third-party service like AWS is that you outsource expertise, basically. So you could spend a year learning as much as it's taken, a decade for this person to become an expert in this niche thing, but that's really a waste of your time when it's already done. I mean, the thing of it is a lot of these problems have fairly optimized solutions, not even fairly, but incredibly optimized solutions. So there's just no way to even catch up at this point.
Yeah, I read a blog post the other day. It was pretty good. It was called like software developers are plumbers, and I think you missed the mark with the analogy. And I'll try to make a better analogy. Uh,
Developers are plumbers.
so basically, what he was saying, and again, I think he missed the mark with the analogy. So I'm going to use a different analogy to kind of explain what he was saying. Like, uh, you don't need nuclear engineers working as electricians. You have nuclear engineers and you have electricians and then you have consumers. So, like when you need an outlet added to your house, you don't call a nuclear engineer, you call an electrician. And so the nuclear engineer figures out how to optimize energy and make it available to the to like civilization. But then an electrician will take that optimization and deliver it to your house in a consumer grade format kind of thing.
I
Does
thought
that
the analogy was that software developers are dealing with a bunch of crap all day.
Yeah, well, that's probably more apropos. But he was
Well, yeah, I guess the analogy kind of makes sense. And so there's basically two sides to it, which is sort of, again, if we're talking about people who are interested in a career in software development, you sort of have to pick your side. So whether you're going to be specialized or jack of all trades kind of depends on what side of the wall you're on. So if you are on the AWS side, you're going to want to be hyper specialized in whatever you're interested in. So whether that's, memory management for PostgreSQL databases, like you need to know more than basically anyone else to work at AWS. And that's like what you're going to be working on full time. But if you're going to be building apps and websites and you're going to be leveraging this stuff, you kind of want to be a jack of all trades as far as what technologies you're actually using. So it's not, you're not going to be an expert in using DynamoDB from AWS. You're going to be an expert in AWS. You're going to be an expert in React Native. You're going to be an expert in HTML, CSS. You're going to be an expert in, Ruby, Rails, some sort of programming language, Python. Like, so you're going to be sort of a jack of all trades at probably a lower level of expertise than the people who are building the tools that you're going to use. But you have to know, you have to have a much broader scope of knowledge than somebody who's specializing in building the stuff that you're going to actually be using on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and that's just the thing. Like, if it's gonna be really tough to make it unless you are working at a company like Amazon, whose job it is to put out these optimizations. Just like the nuclear engineer, it's going to be really tough if you're going in to say, you're trying to get a job as the electrician at Sears, and you're saying I'm a nuclear engineer. Like it's gonna be tough. Like I have this great knowledge of nuclear energy. They're going to be like, awesome, but can you wire up a socket? And they're going to be like, no, that's not what I do. And so you're going to have a tough time, and you're going to be competing for a dwindling number of jobs out there.
Yeah, and I guess vice versa. If you're an electrician and you're applying for a nuclear engineering position, they're going to say, great, you can do 100 different things, but we need somebody who can do this one thing better than anyone else.
Right. And it's interesting because I was thinking about it. Like, it doesn't work for everything. Like you can be an expert, the deepest expert in the world at like CSS and HTML, but there's no one who's going to hire you just as an expert in CSS and HTML. Like if you're going to be just an expert in CSS and HTML, you're going to have to be a good author too, because you're going to make some money off of selling books about those subjects. Because I just can't think of a company anymore who hires a CSS or HTML expert.
Well, that's just it. I mean, there's sort of the division between the developers of tools and the people who use those tools to build stuff. And the division is, and either one is good. You just sort of have to know going in what your responsibilities are going to be. So if you're going to be building stuff leveraging AWS, you need a fairly deep knowledge of it, but you don't need the depth of knowledge that the 100 engineers who built the service that you're using on AWS have.
Right, 100%. And like we said, that your job opportunities, if you're a specialist, are going to be a lot less than if you're a general knowledge software developer or software engineer.
Well, yeah, that's another good topic too, because a lot of this stuff is trying to give some advice or pseudo advice to people who are thinking about careers in software development, which we know it's a few fields that's going to stick around for, I was going to say the foreseeable future, but for at least hopefully a lifetime, at least another generation or so. I think there's more security in software development than there is in a number of other fields, whether that's being a paralegal or gosh, there's so much stuff being automated now, like truck driver. You're not going to have a job in 10 years. But with software development, there sort of is a built-in safety net, just because the actual automation of stuff is going to rely on software development so much.
Right.
So you're going to be taking people's jobs away, but you're going to be the one doing it, so you'll still have a job. But anyways, with that in mind, if software development is sort of the viable career option that you're looking to go into, you really do. There are two sides to it. So you can work for a big company and you're going to be sort of hyper focused on the one thing they need you to be hyper focused on, versus if you're going to be working with a smaller company, if you're going to be working on the software development side for a larger company, like you said, you can't just focus on HTML and CSS. You have to branch out and be sort of a jack of all trades who can hop in on a project doing whatever they need you to do, whether that's building the back end, working with the database, setting up the architecture on AWS, actually building the application with React or React Native, or even designing stuff like we talked about last or 2 weeks ago, the difference between designers and developers. Sometimes you need to hop in and be the one who actually lays the pages out.
Right, right. There was an interesting thing about, you talk about truck drivers, and it's weird because that's actually one of the jobs that is most needed right now, because people are stopping wanting to do it. And so
Just because there's no job security?
no,
That's the interesting conundrum, if that's the case.
it's like they want to stop doing it because uh, it's weird, because it's not really a job for humans. It requires like weird hours. It doesn't pay that well. And
It's super stressful.
right, it's super
My dad was a truck
stressful.
driver for
Yeah,
a little while.
yeah,
It's not sort of a glamorous job.
yeah. If anyone's interested in doing it, it was it was the Wall Street Journal who wrote the article, and it was pretty fascinating, because they put
And
it
that's
out
not to
there.
denigrate truck drivers, by the way. I hope it
No,
didn't
not
come across as
no, not at all.
negative.
I'm using their words. They're saying, like, there's people who, number one, they said there's been a rise in independent truck drivers who are leaving companies because they say that they're just not paying very well, and they promise these, like, you can earn a salary up to $100,000, but that $100,000, like, with all these crazy performance bonuses that no one can ever get to, kind of thing. And it's
Yeah,
just
and I guess the other thing is that people are trying to, I mean, margins are getting so tight that everyone's getting squeezed all through the truck driving stack. So that's sort of getting passed along to truck drivers too, that they're forced to work longer hours for slightly lower pay too. So it's
right,
definitely
right.
getting tougher.
And you see this where you see teachers striking right now across the country. Well, maybe you don't, because you avoid the news even more than I do. But
It's so news agnostic, yeah,
I have a buddy who's a
or
teacher.
avoiding.
I have a buddy who's a teacher, and he tells me all these strikes that are happening. So my point is if we have an administration that right now is much like the Reagan administration, which is not labor union friendly, and they don't really put up with strikes. And so it'll be interesting to see. And we also have an administration that is not amicable to influx of cheap labor. So you put that together, and you're going to kind of come to a head in a lot of respects, because the jobs have to be done, and the people doing the jobs don't want to do them, and we can't let people into our country who do want to do those jobs.
So at some point, you're gonna have to pay people,
Or pay
or it
machines,
just shuts down.
or
Yeah.
build machines that are going to do it, and the machines
Well,
don't
that's
care.
the other thing, is that it comes that that's sort of the crux of the issue, because at some point the cost of labor is going to increase to the point where it actually does make financial sense to automate as much as you can.
Right. Or the artificial dearth of available labor. It's like, well,
Yeah,
no one,
which sort of artificially pushes up the price of labor,
right,
right?
exactly. Well, no one wants to do this. You know, what they're saying is that no one wants to do it at this price. Well, but what
Right,
they're saying
right,
is
right.
if no one wants to do this, then I guess we'll have to put in machines.
You
Which
might
I
as well
mean,
spend a couple, $100 million to automate our entire fleet of trucks.
and the thing that we didn't talk about, that we haven't talked about on this program, but we were kind of talking about it off air, is there is another extremely high cost and rising for employees now, and that's the legal aspect of having employees. Think about all these lawsuits and everything that, like every time we hear something, about Google, an employee at Google, or an employee
Six
here,
hundred million dollar lawsuit, that one.
yeah, sexual harassment there, all these lawsuits that's being taken into account when companies are deciding whether to replace employees. Like,
Yeah, it really is a cost benefit analysis at that point. You can
right,
actually
right,
crunch the numbers.
right. Like again, not to denigrate anyone, but like, okay, we have an assembly line of factory workers, and all together they cost us $100 million a year, and there's a 20% chance of a $600 million lawsuit from one of them. And so,
Yeah,
as that percentage chance,
workplace injuries, there's going to be X number with Y%, so that's gonna cost an extra $350 million.
exactly, and don't let anyone fool you. At the end of the day, it's a math problem, and once the equation tips one way or to that direction, there's no going back. Once that equation tips to the side and the outlay of cash is made, there's no way it's ever going to go back because the cash has been outlaid. That's the only thing that holds it back from happening right now is that initial investment into automation.
Well, and I guess just to loop back to the topic at hand, what sort of how this relates to specialization versus jack of all trades. I think the smart money is on becoming a jack of all trades because, and it also kind of relates to our discussion of mobile devices. I think specialization is going to reach a point where stuff is so optimized that you're not going to need that much specialized labor. Like you're going to be squeaking out such small amounts of optimizations at some point that you're just not going to need that many specialized people. Like at some point, you can only optimize the database so much. At some point, AWS is going to basically have solved database optimization. Like you could maybe squeak out a couple milliseconds per cycle, or probably, what am I talking about? Like nanoseconds per cycle. And
Right,
like
right.
that's the most you're going to get. So is AWS going to, like, what's the cost benefit analysis of having another specialized database engineer who can squeak out 4 nanoseconds per transaction versus just saying, well, we don't actually need to do that. I think probably we're all set. So I guess the argument there is if you're a jack of all trades who's on the other side and is actually building the stuff, building the applications, building the automated services, that might be a safer bet than becoming specialized in one specific aspect of the software development stack.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it's on that same kind of discussion. One of the things that we've talked about before is the role of like your IT guy and like the network administrator, the guy who is works at a company and he like fixes your computer, he fixes the printer. We talked about that role has been going away because that too was kind of number one, things are moving to the cloud. Number two is he did have like a specialization knowledge of the hardware that was being used at that company or whatever. And as it's getting more and more ubiquitous, that need for specialization was going away. And, people like us, software developers, we knew enough about computers. So someone could be like, hey, can you just fix my computer real quick? Yeah, sure, whatever. Let me just get on Stack Overflow. But if you go the other way and automation becomes a big thing across industries, you're going to have IT people on site who can fix the glitches that come up with AI, which are certain to happen. But those people aren't going to be they're not going to be experts in AI. They're going to know how to kind of like reboot the system, re-kick it, kind of like fix a malfunctioning AI bot. That I could see that role coming way back. But that's going to be kind of, it'll start off as like a specialization role, but I can even see that become more of a general role on staffers who are already with the company.
You mean general role of sort of AI knowledge as opposed to knowing one particular machine learning algorithm or even
Exa-
one aspect of one particular
right,
machine learning algorithm?
right, exactly. Like if if the AI bot on the assembly line starts making purple widgets pink, okay,
Right.
well, probably have to reboot that. Well, we know that's the AI 17. If you just reboot it, it gets colors right again. It's for some reason it just doesn't get colors right after a while. You just restart it, and it's all good. Like that type of knowledge.
Yeah. So I guess what we're saying is thank you, specialization people. Thank you for all the folks out there who have optimized all this stuff to such a level that it's performative beyond our wildest dreams. Uh, you're not necessarily going to be at least needs going forward. So folks out there who are sort of getting into the field or thinking about what to do, like our recommendation, I think this is from 2 episodes ago when we were talking about, what's the difference between software developer, designer, engineer, webmaster, all that stuff, is you need to be all those things so that you can make yourself as what's the word? I guess as attractive to the companies that you're applying to as possible. And you're sort of future proofing yourself because as a jack of all trades, you can sort of try and stay ahead of the times on as many technologies as you possibly can.
Yeah, and actually to bring it back, I was trying to look for it real quick and I can't find it. Oh, I know where it was. The I saw this back when I used to have a Facebook account, which is no longer the case. But one of our colleagues back at ESPN posted an article about how ESPN is signing a huge deal with AWS, which is interesting because there's a whole division when we worked there that was like that provided what AWS provided, like a whole division in a whole building, in a whole city, in a whole state, like
Yeah,
just
exactly.
dedicated to that. And like they can probably tell those people whatever they want to tell them. They're going to have to retrain if they're going to keep their job because there was so much overlap just in what I was reading about it that there would be no sense in keeping those people doing what they were doing if ESPN was going to use AWS.
But that's the difficult part. I mean, that's the rub right there, is that you could have dozens. I mean, I guess the department size was like 150 people, right? Or was it even more than that? But
It could have been even more than that. It could have been.
like the whole point of AWS is you probably need 5 people to manage these services.
Right.
Because the management of these services, so to speak, is what AWS provides, like booting up servers, having failover, automated backups. Like this is the whole purpose of AWS, is that, out of the box, we'll just do that for you. And we'll do it better than you probably could anyway.
Right. Right.
So
Exactly.
it's tough. It's tough. It really is. But I guess at the end of the day, know as much as you possibly can about as many technologies related to software development as you possibly can, and you'll at least semi protect yourself from becoming obsolete in the near future.
Yeah. And the other thing is kind of like, I mean, if you find something that's fun for you, again, like if you think it's really cool to make a light up LED sign using a Raspberry Pi and IoT, like by all means, go ahead. Tinkering is great. Tinkering is awesome. But make sure you're paying attention to what the big boys are doing. Like the big boys are using JavaScript now. They are using JavaScript. Everything is geared toward making life easier for JavaScript developers. I can tell you, we've both done a number of behind the scenes surveys with AWS and some of the bigger companies. They're pushing JavaScript. Google pushes Go to some respect, but even they're big proponents of Angular. Microsoft is pushing TypeScript to the nth degree, and TypeScript is just JavaScript. That's all it is. And so, I mean, kind of pay attention to the trends in the industry. And don't pay attention to Joe Blow user on Reddit who's a Python developer and who's saying JavaScript is the worst thing ever. JavaScript may be the worst thing ever. That's something you can't argue. You can't argue that. But what you also can't argue is that JavaScript is what all of the industry leaders are using and putting their weight behind. So pay attention to that because it's great if you love Python and you want to write cool stuff in Python, but you better know JavaScript and what the big boys are using anyway.
Yep. So be an intelligent and observant jack of all trades, I think, is the takeaway from this episode. And that's where we're going to end it this week. Tune in next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be on time. We'll be a little bit early next week for the next episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. Make sure to check out the blog post for this episode at gunnertech.com. You can check out the podcast for this episode at iTunes. Head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, or Kobo, or anywhere else ebooks are sold for copies of our ebooks. We got 3 up there now. And head to our Facebook page to sign up for the Country Store giveaway. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. And while you're there, go ahead and answer the question of the week, which this week, remind them, Cody, what that is.
Do you use a computer other than a mobile or tablet device, as in a desktop computer or a laptop computer?
Outside of work hours.
Yes,
I think probably
yes.
Almost everyone uses computers at work. Outside of work, do you just use your mobile device?
Except for wallet makers. Wallet makers don't use computers at work.
But they do use the wallet as a computer.
That's right.
But that's going to do it for this week's episode. Make sure to tune in next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Derry. That's Cody. We'll see you next week.